My name is Mick. I worked at a manufacturing plant in the Kent industrial area outside Seattle, Washington. I lived in Tacoma at the time. The story I'm about to tell happened one night when I decided to stay at my friend Kevin's apartment near Renton, not far from where I worked. One night, I got off work pretty late. There had been so much overtime that day that I didn't leave the factory until almost 10 at night. Honestly, I didn't feel like driving all the way back home to Tacoma by myself that late. So I decided to stay over at Kevin's place instead. Since I had the next day off anyway, I figured we could hang out, play games, and stay up all night. About 10 minutes later, I arrived at Kevin's apartment complex. The building had 2 floors, 3 rooms downstairs, 2 rooms upstairs. Kevin's room was on the 2nd floor. When I arrived, most of the lights inside the building were already off. The hallway was quiet, almost too quiet. I figured the other tenants were either asleep or simply not home yet. When I reached Kevin's room, I saw him hanging out with another guy who also rented a room there. Long story short, we spent the night talking, playing games, and just relaxing. The air inside the room felt hot and stuffy. So I told Kevin I was going to crack the door open a little to let some air in. As soon as I opened the door slightly, I noticed there was another room directly across from his. The light inside that room was on. I asked Kevin whose room it was. He shrugged and said the room had been empty for as long as he lived there, but strangely, the light inside was always turned on. Since the room was empty, I started thinking maybe I should rent it myself, so I wouldn't have to drive back and forth from Tacoma every day. I looked toward the room again, and for a split second, I thought I saw someone peeking at me from inside the window. The moment I looked directly at it, the figure suddenly disappeared. I could have sworn I saw a dark silhouette standing there, like someone had been watching us. I got up and walked closer to the doorway, trying to look inside the room. But when I peeked in, the room was completely empty. No furniture, no person, nothing. I figured maybe my eyes were just tired. So I went back inside Kevin's room and kept hanging out with him. Time passed quickly. Before we realized it, it was already after 1 a.m. Kevin's friend went back to his room, and we both started getting ready to sleep. But before I fell asleep, I asked Kevin about the empty room again. I asked how long it had been vacant and whether it might eventually be available to rent. Kevin said he honestly had no idea how long it had been empty. According to him, ever since he moved there, nobody had ever lived in that room. What made it stranger was that the landlord apparently refused to rent it out. Kevin once saw someone ask about renting that exact room because it was empty, but the landlord immediately refused and said, "That room is already occupied. Choose another one." But as far as Kevin knew, nobody had ever actually stayed there. Eventually, the conversation ended, and we both fell asleep. Then sometime in the middle of the night, I felt something gently stroke in my cheek. Cold fingers, soft, slow, moving across my face. My eyes snapped open instantly. Kevin was still asleep across the room, hugging a pillow with his back turned toward me. But I could still clearly feel something touching my cheek. At first, I thought maybe it was just a bug or something. So I closed my eyes again. But seconds later, I felt it again. This time, the touch felt colder. I immediately opened my eyes and suddenly I smelled something horrible. A rotten smell, like wet soil mixed with garbage. Kevin was still sleeping in the exact same position. I wanted to wake him up, but before I could move, the smell became even stronger. I forced myself to sit up and look around the room. Nothing was there. Then suddenly, someone knocked on the door. 3 slow knocks. At first, I thought maybe Kevin's friend had forgotten something. Kevin was still asleep, so I walked toward the door and opened it. Nobody was there. The hallway outside was completely empty. I closed the door again. But the moment the door shut, the knocking started again, louder this time. At that point, I knew something wasn't right. I immediately tried waking Kevin up. Kevin, hey Kevin, wake up. But he wouldn't respond. The knocking continued, slow, heavy, right outside the door. Trying to convince myself it was nothing, I grabbed the doorknob again and pulled the door open quickly. And standing directly in front of me was an old man. His body was thin and hunched forward. He had long gray hair, a beard, and a mustache. He wore old black clothes, and from his body came the exact same rotten smell I had noticed earlier. The old man stood there silently with his head lowered. Then, I heard him mumbling something under his breath. It sounded almost like a chant. I couldn't understand a single word. Then suddenly, he slowly opened his mouth wider and wider. And at that exact moment, something grabbed my shoulder from behind, hard. I spun around in panic. It was Kevin. He had finally woken up. And when I looked back toward the doorway again, the old man was gone, completely gone. Kevin asked me what I was doing standing at the door in the middle of the night. I told him everything about the knocking, the smell, and the old man standing outside the room. Kevin listened quietly, but strangely, he didn't seem surprised. He just told me to go back to sleep. The next morning, Kevin finally explained everything to me. He told me he had seen the same old man before. Not just him, but several other tenants in the building too. People often claimed they saw an old man sitting silently inside the empty room across from Kevin's. Sometimes late at night, they would hear coughing coming from inside that room. There were rumors that the old man had once lived there years ago. Nobody knew if it was true, but according to the people in the building, there was one rule everyone followed. After midnight, if someone knocks on your door, don't open it, because if you do, you might see who's really standing outside.